Hi, I'm Doug Gould of WorshipMD, and what we're going to talk about right now is equalization. And it seems to be one of the most misunderstood things from volunteer sound people on how to actually use equalizers. When I'm training up new people in sound, I'm trying to teach them to begin with that the level is really the most important thing. And you can actually do a lot with a mix just with level. Tone is good. But if the levels aren't right, tone is useless. So level is really key, and then EQ can come later. If you don't know anything about EQ, I would suggest keeping your hands off of it until you learn what it does and how to use it. And that's going to depend a lot on you being at home, listening to a lot of music, training your ears to identify certain frequencies, what ranges of frequencies occur in different instruments, where's the vocal range, what range is the guitar in, what range is the kick drum in, and those kind of things. So you kind of know them. And these are things that you can actually do at home. There's lots of things that you can do to study frequency at home. On your mixer that you have presently in your church, I would venture a guess that in most small churches, you have EQ that maybe has one high fixed frequency, one low fixed frequency, maybe a mid. Those are called fixed EQs. The high and the low are fixed at certain frequencies. So the low might be fixed at 100 hertz. The top one might be fixed at 10K. If you're fortunate enough to have a mid-range, it might be what's called a peak filter at 1K. And I'm going to show you all these things in a minute so you have an idea of what I'm talking about. If you have those types of EQs, to be frank with you, they're pretty useless, to tell you the truth. And you can't do a lot with them except if you're using them as cuts. And I'm going to show you some of these things now as we go to the board. So let's take a look. So I'm going to explain first to you what fixed EQ is and what it might look like on your mixer. You might have two EQs. You might have a low and you might have a high. And typically on inexpensive small format mixers, these are using what are called shelf EQs. And shelf EQs are very similar to the kind of EQ that would be on your car stereo. You have a bass and a treble, and when you turn the bass up, you're turning up a shelving EQ set at a certain frequency, and when you're turning up the treble, you're doing the same thing on the high frequencies. And what that looks like is, if you look at our capture screen in a minute here, we're going to increase the gain at the frequency that the fixed EQs are usually set at, which is typically 100 on the low side and typically around, 10K on the high side. So when I boost the lows, watch what happens on the screen. I'm boosting everything from 100 hertz down to 20. So you're not just boosting 100. You're not just boosting the nice frequencies that are on a kick drum or bass guitar. You're actually boosting everything down below what you can actually hear through your system, which is just going to make it more muddy and more rumbly. So the best effect, or best use I should say, of a shelving EQ on the low side would be as very similar to a high pass filter. I'm going to cut like that. Same thing with the highs. When you boost the highs on a car stereo, you're basically doing this. You're boosting everything from 10K and above. Not very useful. Again, the best use for that would be as a low pass filter and use it as a cut. Now, you might also have on your EQ a mid-range. And the mid-range is not a shelf. It's usually a peak filter. And peak filters are in the shape of a bell. Again, though, it's going to be fixed. Your mid-range is probably going to be somewhere around 1K. So when I boost the mid-range on a mixer like that, you're boosting a range of frequencies that are about 1.5 octaves wide. And if I can show you that on my screen, here's what that would look like. And let's take these off for a minute so you see it more clearly. So when you're boosting that, that's all you're boosting. 1K, not very useful, or I can cut 1K. Boost, cut. So you have a low frequency that's fixed, a high frequency that's fixed, and you have a mid frequency that's fixed at those particular frequency points. Now, how does that differ from a semi-parametric? Fixed means it's fixed. It's like having a radio station with one station on it. Semi-parametric means I can sweep the frequency. So now if I hear something in an instrument that's offensive, but I don't know where it is, I can actually sweep the frequency around to find it. I can tune it. And while I'm doing this, I'm listening to the instrument or the vocalist through that. And then I can either boost it or I can cut it. So way more useful. Now I'm able to shift that frequency around to find offending frequencies to make certain frequencies stand out a little bit better. Now what's the difference between a semi-parametric and a parametric? You see how wide a swath of frequencies I'm distributed across? Parametrics have what is called an adjustable bandwidth, or shortened term for that would be Q. And the Q allows me to either make that swath of frequencies more narrow or wider. So it's affecting a lot more. So very narrow cuts or wider boost. That's typically the rule. When you're cutting something, you want to cut it more narrow so you're not affecting a lot of the musical character of that element, of the guitar or the vocal. When I'm boosting, I want to make it a little bit wider so it does sound a little bit more musical. You can narrow it up, you can listen to it. Again, I want you to use your ears. Develop your ears so that when it sounds right, it usually is right. But these are tools to just help you find where you need to be. So as you can see, fixed EQ is pretty limited in the things that you can do to actually change the essence of a sound or make it better. In the next video, we're going to talk about semi-parametric EQs or sweepable EQs, and then we'll talk about parametrics after that, which are even a little bit more flexible, and how we can tame those things down that are offending or make things sound sweeter. Until next time, Doug Gould.